Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start our presentation. For those of you who are just joining us, please in the chat, share your name and where you're from. My name is Cal Lopez, and thank you for joining us today to our Unpacking Commissioner Rules to support school transitions for students experiencing homelessness or in substitute care. I wanted to share with everyone that we will be recording today's session and that it will be posted on our highly mobile and at-risk webinar webpage. And we're going to go ahead here on our next slide is start off by sharing our North Star statement. So we equip school systems to increase awareness, promote equitable access, and improve outcomes for all special populations. Here on our next slide, we're going to go ahead and share who our presenters are for today. My name is Cal Lopez, and I am the state coordinator for the Texas Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. And I'll hand it over to LaTrenda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is LaTrenda Watson. I'm the at-risk state coordinator, and welcome today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Brown. I'm the special projects coordinator for the highly mobile and at-risk division. I oversee our military connected student programs and currently our pregnancy related services program. And I'll be in the chat today supporting the webinar. So if you have any questions, I'll be responding to those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And so we did want to share a quick reminder that if you, we will have breaks for questions throughout the training, and that we ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box for Jordan to review. So here on our next slide, we're going to go ahead and go over our webinar objectives and outline. So during today's training, we're going to provide tools, processes, and procedures to support implementation of commissioner rules, to support school transitions for students experiencing homelessness or in foster care. We're going to provide you some introductory information, some background information regarding the rules. We're going to cover welcome packets, student introductions, mentor and student ambassador programs, nutrition benefits, enrollment conference, and then we'll have our closing and next steps. Throughout today's presentation, we really wanted you to utilize this transition assistance worksheet. And Jordan has dropped the link in the chat. This worksheet tool is a fillable PDF. And we would love for you to utilize it during our training this morning to jot down any notes, helpful strategies, next steps, or questions. And not only today, but throughout our training series. Here on our next slide, we're going to review some common terminology that will be used throughout this morning's training. McKinney-Vento refers to the federal McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Texas Education for Homeless Children and Youth refers to our TECHI program, which is our state McKinney-Vento program. McKinney-Vento eligible students refers to students experiencing homelessness. And McKinney-Vento liaison refers to the designated LEA local homeless liaison. On our next slide, substitute care refers to the placement of a child who is in conservatorship of the Texas Department of Family Protective Services in care outside the child's home. Foster care refers to 24-hour substitute care for children placed away from their parents or guardians and for whom DFPS has placement and care responsibilities. And then foster care liaisons refers to the designated LEA local foster care contact. On the next slide, we just wanted to share some updates about what is on the horizon. So Texas Administrative Code 89.1605B, 89.16.1611, and 89.1607 will be open for revisions early the first half of 2022. Stakeholders have pointed out areas where the rules could be made clearer and could be better aligned, and TEA looks forward to stakeholder feedback through the public comment process. We just wanted to highlight that update today. On our next slide, we wanted to share with you the rule requirements to ease transition for students in foster care or for students experiencing homelessness. So the commissioner rules concerning transition assistance can be found on the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 89, Adaptation for Special Populations, under Subchapter FF, Commissioner Rules concerning transition assistance for highly mobile students who are homeless or in substitute care. The adopted new rules assist with transition of students who are homeless or in substitute care from one school to another and provide LEAs with guidance on the requirements of the Texas Education Code 25007. And they went into effect on March 30th of 2020. Here on our next slide, we're going to go ahead and go over the rule requirements for 89.1605, and this is just a quick overview, that LEAs must develop systems to ease transitions of students who are homeless or in foster care during the first 2 weeks of enrollment or at a new school. Systems must include student welcome packets, school introductions to ease transition, nutrition benefits, and enrollment conferences. So on this slide, we will review some self-reflective questions that will assist with our discussion today on systems to ease transitions for students who are in foster care or McKinney-Vento eligible. Does your LEA provide welcome packets, staff introductions, and ensure that all foster care and McKinney-Vento eligible students receive nutrition benefits upon enrollment? Do your welcome packets include LEA and campus information, such as the student code of conduct or campus staff contacts or tutoring opportunities that help to ease student transitions at a new school? Do you have a student ambassador or mentor program? Is there a process to expedite the nutrition application process for foster care and McKinney-Vento eligible students? In the next few slides, we will review 3 resources to help assist with welcome packet requirements and best practices, school introductions to ease transition, and nutrition benefits. Here on our next slide, our first resource that we would like to highlight is the Student Welcome Packet Requirements and Best Practices resource. And these resources will also be posted on our highly mobile and at-risk website, along with the recording of today's presentation. This new resource is a quick and easy reference guide. At the top of the resource, we do highlight the rule citation, and it provides a list of welcome packet required items and some additional considerations for our foster care and McKinney-Vento eligible students. Here on this next slide, we wanted to highlight that the resource specifically calls out the welcome packet required items. As you can see in the yellow folder icon, it shares information about extracurricular activities, club activities, information on fee waivers, tutoring, code of conduct, and contact information for pertinent staff. And then on our blue notebook page, it shares the pertinent school staff information that is required, such as for the student's counselor, a school nurse, social workers, foster care, McKinney-Vento liaisons, administrators, and additional support staff. Here on the next slide, it highlights another section of this resource that shares information about welcome packet best practices. So we wanted to provide some additional foster care and McKinney-Vento items for consideration, such as information about specific student clubs and after-school programs and enrichment activities, mentor programs, family engagement opportunities, post-secondary planning, summer and holiday resources, and any other community resources available to support our students. So I know that's already been a lot of information so far, and so we wanted to take a brief moment to pause to process. Jordan, have we received any questions or comments so far in the chat?
Yeah, so we did receive one question about when will these documents be posted, and those will be posted within the next week. So you can see those on our tools and resources webpage. There's a placeholder there right now, but they will be posted in the following week for you guys to download and use.
Perfect. Thank you.
And that's the only question that I see for now.
Okay, great. And like I said, throughout the presentation, we'll have several opportunities to pause for any comments or questions. Okay, so then we'll go ahead and go on to our next resource, which is for school introductions to ease transitions. And we provided a screenshot of the second resource. Again, it's a really quick and easy one-page reference guide that does include the rule citation, provides strategies on how to ease school transition. It really calls out information on student ambassador programs. We've gotten several questions about it from districts that do not have one and would like to learn more about student ambassador programs, and some key contacts who can assist or be part of your school transition team. So here on the next slide, we wanted to really highlight some information from this resource. And so strategies to ease transitions. So this resource really calls out about providing introductions and how to provide introductions to the campus by providing tours and activities and welcome events within 2 weeks of enrollment, about implementing mentoring programs in which staff or community mentors can facilitate introductions and have lunch with students and check-ins with students throughout the day, providing information on peer-to-peer programs and other student-led activities and clubs, and especially extracurricular. And then lastly, designating a staff member to whom the student can reach out to for support and services. This person provides a safe space for students to share any concerns, needs, or life changes as they transition to their new school. We also wanted to highlight the key contacts, such as campus staff members who have been designated as student mentors, any community mentor sponsors or student-led groups, and again, our student ambassadors for those of you who have that program. And then on our next slide, we really wanted to kind of highlight student ambassador programs since we received so many questions about it. And I really love the pictures on this slide. On the first one, you can see these 4 students very happy to be at their campus. And we always hope that when we have new students, that we help ensure that they feel welcomed. And on the other picture is of a high school. And we know many of our high schools are very, very large. And we know we've received input and feedback that oftentimes our students may feel overwhelmed, may not know exactly, where the cafeteria is, or about where they can receive certain services. So our student ambassadors are students who represent the school and introduce the new students to the campus and its culture. Student ambassadors are familiar with the campus environment and have a positive attitude, great communication skills. They're often leaders on the campus, and oftentimes our students feel more comfortable with these new introductions within their campus by one of their peers. So we just really wanted to kind of highlight, and then we put some suggestions of what could be included in a campus tour, such as the library, the nurse's office, the counseling office, the cafeteria. And so I really wanted to highlight how student ambassadors can help and ease student transitions. Here on our next slide, we're going to move on to our next resources, which is about nutrition benefits. Again, a quick one-pager highlights the information from the rule on the top of the page, and then provides some nutrition best practices. And here on our next slide, we've really popped out this aspect of the resource that discusses nutrition benefit best practices and ensuring that students are coded appropriately with the effective date for this service, collaborating with your nutrition coordinator to establish a process, such as sending an approval notification via email, and that LEA should provide training to new and returning staff on nutrition eligibility and application processes. So applications must be expedited when the student qualifies for SNAP benefits, and ensuring that there's a system and supports that families are notified that since the student is in foster care or McKinney-Vento eligible, that they do automatically qualify for these nutrition benefits. And so here is another opportunity to pause the process. So we hope you're utilizing the PDF resource that Jordan did drop in the chat earlier. We hope that this is helpful for you to jot down any notes or helpful strategies. And so we're going to go ahead and take some time for Jordan to look at, did we receive any additional questions or any additional information in the chat? And in the chat, you could also drop in if you do have a student ambassador program already. We would love to hear from you, or for any best practices that you already have in place to ease student transitions.
Yeah, so we do have one question. Are we required to have a school ambassador program or student ambassador program?
So no, you are not required to have a student ambassador program, but it is a recommended best practice that we are highlighting, just because oftentimes we know that students feel more comfortable with a peer and engagement with their peers as they transition to a new program. So we just wanted to provide this as a best practice, as a strategy. We have received many questions from LEAs in the field wanting to learn more about that. So we just wanted to highlight it as part of today's presentation.
So there was another question from our previous section about welcome packets. They asked if we have not done this, should we go back and do this?
So providing welcome packets.
Mm-hmm.
So before we say yes or no, our question would be to you is, do you provide welcome packets for any of your new students as they enroll? And so if they do that, that would be a good start, right? You may have a lot of this information already in a welcome packet that you provide to any and all new students. Now, if there's some information, again, that's specific to McKinney-Vento eligible students and new students in foster care, you can always provide any additional resources at any time throughout the school year to support them. So thank you for asking that question.
I think that's all the questions that we have for now.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everyone who has been putting information in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Latrenda to share more about our next section of the training.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining us. In this section, we will talk about the rule and review strategies and best practices to assist students with implementation for the enrollment conference. So the rule requirement 18.1605 for the enrollment conference, districts and open enrollment charter schools must convene an enrollment conference with the student within the first 2 weeks of enrollment at a new school, or within the first 2 weeks after the student is identified as homeless or in substitute care. And the main thing we want you to focus on in this section is at a new school. So as a reminder about the rule, we want to talk about implementation considerations. So for capacity, the enrollment conference must be implemented in the first 2 weeks for all new students. TEA, however, we recognize that there may be capacity concerns that impact the LEA's ability to complete this requirement. It is important that LEAs strive to complete enrollment conferences as close to 2 weeks as possible. For similar meetings and alignment, an enrollment conference or a similarly proposed meeting may already be occurring. The intent is not to duplicate this process. Ensure that all components of the enrollment conference are addressed, and if there is any opportunity to supplement or enhance an existing process to address these items, please feel free to do so. So you may already be holding meetings, but don't call it an enrollment conference. But if you make sure the enrollment conference components are addressed, you may feel free to include it. So meeting structure and flexibility. An enrollment conference or a similar meeting can occur in many forms. LEAs, you have the flexibility with the location and venue for how long these meetings occur. The student's participation in the meeting should be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Records and retention. LEA should follow local procedures for meetings and records retention concerning enrollment conferences and student education records. So please maintain confidentiality. So we have been giving this presentation and talking about enrollment conferences. So now we're going to talk about some questions that we have been receiving. So one of the questions were, is the enrollment conference just with the student, or do we meet with the parents as well? We highly recommend and encourage you to include the parent or guardian of the student, but it is not required by the rule. What about families for students at different campuses within the district? Can one enrollment conference be carried out for all of the students in one setting? If it meets the needs of the family, then one meeting can be implemented provided each of the students' individual needs are discussed. So if you want to hold one enrollment conference for a family, make sure you discuss each individual student's needs during that conference. Is the enrollment conference for the students of all grade levels? Yes, it is. But however, the topics and the format of the meeting may need to be adjusted so that the meeting is age and topic appropriate and addresses the unique individualized needs of each student, depending on their grade, age, and other factors. Is the enrollment conference meant for newly enrolled students? Yes, it is. The enrollment conference is intended for newly enrolled students. If a student should have been flagged at enrollment but wasn't, the LEA should revisit to ensure all the components that are required within the enrollment conference have been addressed. So now we want to talk about some self-reflective questions and to see how we're doing. So does your LEA have systems to facilitate the convening of an enrollment conference within the first 2 weeks of enrollment or within the first 2 weeks after a student is identified as McKinney-Vento eligible or in foster care? So are there any written LEA or campus policies or systems to support the convening of enrollment conferences within the first 2 weeks of enrollment or within the first 2 weeks after the student is identified for foster care or McKinney-Vento eligible? So do you have any local policies regarding enrollment conferences? Next, are annual trainings provided by the LEA and campus staff on the process to facilitate the convening of an enrollment conference? When does this training occur and who attends this training? So do you have any local policies regarding trainings for your staff regarding enrollment conferences? And make sure you document when is the training occurring and who needs to attend these trainings. So now let's get into our new enrollment conference tool. So with the new tool that we have, we will discuss the enrollment conference definition, also the topics for discussion, and any key people to include at the enrollment conference. In this tool, in this section, we will follow through and talk through each one of these topics of the enrollment conference. So just some enrollment conference reminders. It must occur within the 2 weeks of enrollment or identification as homeless or in substitute care. The convening cannot delay or impede enrollment. And we want to make sure during the enrollment conference that you address students' attendance, you address their grades, credits, interventions, supports, and other issues and concerns that need to take place. We want to also make sure we invite key LEA staff and campus staff, and make sure you invite the parents, guardians, caregivers, and case managers. Now, with the intent of the enrollment conference, why are we conducting enrollment conferences? This is the main intent behind it. We want to identify academic and extracurricular interests of the student. You also want to make sure that you develop course and instructional strategies. We want to determine any social, emotional supports that are needed. We want to make sure that we introduce the school processes and opportunities for engagement. You want to help the student and the family know any school processes that you have and any way that they can engage with the school community. Next, we want to make sure we review credits and any assessment information during that meeting. And also you want to communicate information that may impact a student's success if needed. Always maintain confidentiality and discretion when sharing student information. So now let's pause the process. We just talked about a lot of information about the enrollment conference. Let's take a moment and pause the process. Jordan, do we have any questions we want to answer?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions, and so I'm just going to go over some at a high level. If a student has been at the school but is newly identified as homeless or in foster care, do we need to hold an enrollment conference?
Yes, we need to hold an enrollment conference based upon the rule. It is stated within the first 2 weeks or when identified the first 2 weeks after identification.
Okay. Another question is, are the LEA requirements for transition assistance the same for students returning from a DAEP, a JJAP, or a juvenile adult detention center?
Yes, if you have conducted an enrollment conference with the student before they went there, then that enrollment conference still applies. But you do not need to hold one after they come back because the student was already at the school. And remember, we're talking about new students.
Is there an enrollment conference agenda?
We listed a suggestion of topics that you can speak about in the enrollment conference that we will cover in just a couple of minutes in our next slides.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to cover that. We have a couple more questions around that topic, so I'll leave those for later. Again, another question along the similar lines. If a student becomes homeless during the course of the year, is the enrollment conference required if they are already familiar with the school?
When you conduct that enrollment conference with that student, that means you're covering certain other topics now, but we still want you to hold an enrollment conference after identified. So the student, after they were identified, you have 2 weeks to hold an enrollment conference. So your conversations may be a little different within that enrollment conference.
Another person asked, should we document the conference date and the topics?
Yes, you should document any information regarding the enrollment conference that when you had it. So when the student or any information, the student goes to another campus, you can let them know that they had an enrollment conference. But we want you to focus on what you're doing on that campus and make sure that you are documenting when you're having the enrollment conference with the student.
Okay. Sylvia asked, are social workers and counselors provide intake for each student? Can this be counted as an enrollment conference?
So within your enrollment conference, we do have key people to invite that we will be covering in a couple of moments in the next part. So when social workers or counselors are included within the enrollment conference, you can provide information within that enrollment conference.
Okay, and this one kind of ties into our identification questions again, but I haven't seen this one before, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. If a student was identified the previous school year as homeless and continues to meet the eligibility for the next school year, do you need to have an enrollment conference for them in that following year?
I'll go ahead and take that question since it's specifically for students experiencing homelessness. So in the rule, it highlights for when a student enrolls at a new campus. So if the student was identified previously, right, they are not a new student. So we just want to highlight this rule specifically for students who are enrolling at a new campus, and these should occur at that time or within 2 weeks of identification. So if they've been a student who has been at your campus for a few years and they were already identified as McKinney-Vento, the enrollment conference would not specifically apply. So if they were already enrolled at your campus, you would not need to proceed with this. It's only if it's a student who is newly enrolling.
Okay, we have a couple more questions coming in, but I do want to continue on for the sake of time. I did have one question that I missed from our last section that I wanted to cover. Patricia asked, do nutrition benefits include charter schools serving a foster group home? And that's a little specific. Anyone?
I was going to say that's really a really good question, and we can go ahead and take that back for discussion unless LaTrenda does have some guidance regarding that.
No, we can take that back for discussion.
Yes, so any questions that we don't address throughout the Q&A, we'll go back as a team and kind of address that together. So thank you for sharing that question.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and move on to the next section.
Thank you all for your questions. This is very helpful for everyone. So now let's talk about key people to consider, including during the enrollment conference. So we know there are key people identified by the rule. Any key people, we have school administrators, we have foster care liaisons, we have McKinney-Vento liaisons, and we also have counselors. So we know that there's a limited capacity to your including all the key people sometimes. So is everyone required to attend the meeting? No, they are not. But we want to encourage you to be thoughtful about who you are including in your enrollment conferences. So other people to include in the enrollment conference. So you have other LEA and campus staff that you could include in your enrollment conferences. You have your special program staff, your special education, English learner, gifted and talented, and other interventionists or specialists that you may have on your campus. You also can invite teachers, social workers, dropout prevention specialists, attendance and truancy officers. So any additional people may be invited as needed. So these are persons that will be able to assist the student in any manner deemed appropriate. Enrollment conference, again, community support considerations. So you can also invite community supporters, which are parents, guardians, a relative, a foster placement caregiver, a case manager, DFPS educational decision maker, a CASA volunteer. And remember, all of these people are invited as needed. So I know one time when I held an enrollment conference, I invited the DFPS educational specialist to provide information about the student and give us any background information that as a campus, we can make good supportive judgments and decisions based upon those students' needs. So invite additional people as needed. So now we're going to pause the process. Any questions based upon the areas of including people? Now we're talking about any key people you can consider. Remember, we wanted student driven. So if the student has any persons that they would like to invite to the meeting that you feel appropriate, you can invite those people to help the student feel comfortable. And remember, the enrollment conference is for the building of that relationship and welcoming the student to the new campus. So Jordan, do we have any questions or comments? If you have any comments, please include those also.
I'm not seeing any questions specific to who's included in the conference. So I think
Okay.
we can move along. That's fine.
Next, let's talk about key discussion topics. So I know you asked about this earlier. So do we have an agenda? You can probably provide your agenda through some key discussion topics. So some topics would be anything regarding the student's interests, their strengths, and previous successes. So you can start a conversation regarding what previous successes that they have at the previous school and try to build upon that at the new school. Also, students' attendance, any grades, credits, etc., anything that will build the students' academic needs. You can include that as a topic. Also, social and emotional supports, enrollment and withdrawal processes. Talk regarding any policies regarding the school. Let them know what is the enrollment process, what is the withdrawal process. This is more of letting them understand how the schools will support them. And any communication preferences with the parents, guardians, or unaccompanied youth. How would the parents like to be communicated to? Would they like emails? Do they want phone calls? Do they want letters? This is a great time to express an understanding of how they would like to be communicated with. And also any post-secondary readiness. We want to understand the students' goals, ask them what their goals are and how the school can help them achieve those goals. And remember, discussion topics are required and should be adapted to meet the unique needs of each student. So remember, we would like to assist the student in a whole multifaceted way so the student can have positive student outcomes. And in order to work together, we must all work together to talk about the enrollment. We must work together to talk about attendance, talk about their grades, and talk about course credit, and also any assessments that they're taking. And of course, discipline data, if there is any. So all of these subjects come together, all these topics are encouraging positive student outcomes. So now let's take a pause. Any comments? Have you been holding student enrollment conferences? What has been working for you? What topics have you been speaking about during your enrollment conferences? This is a great time to share those comments.
So we had a couple of questions about the procedures of the enrollment conference. One question was, what should the procedures look like? Does TEA have a required documents list?
We provided you with an enrollment conference tool, and from that tool, you can build your, customize it towards your LEA. So we gave you suggestions and any strategies that you can use.
Okay, so I would say there's another question about a template. I think that kind of qualifies as a template as well. And those aren't out necessarily yet, so they haven't been provided. They're still in development and they'll be on the website next week. Sorry, I'm just reading through a couple of the questions here. One question that we did receive from the last section was, do we need signatures or a checklist of the people who have attended the enrollment conference?
You want me to take that one? I would say that's a local decision on how you would like to document the enrollment conference. And we would suggest mirroring it that you do with other meetings or conferences that are similar to bringing your team and staff together and mapping out, working with the student and what are their best needs.
We had another general question about pre-K and kindergarten students that are new, but maybe they have siblings, and so the school has already sort of met with the parents. In that instance, would there need to be an enrollment conference?
I can take this one as well. I believe that we highlighted earlier on, Latrenda, feel free to chime in, that you can address multiple student needs. So the family has more than one student enrolled. You can go ahead and incorporate that in the enrollment conference. Latrenda, do you want to share more about that?
Remember to talk about the student's needs. You want to focus on that student needs. And if they're new to the campus, you need to have an enrollment conference to understand what needs that child may have and how the schools can support.
Another question about documentation. Since the LAs are keeping documentation, where should that documentation from the conference be kept?
That could be a local decision, and remember the information regarding students are confidential, but you want to make sure that you did have it somewhere to where someone understood that an enrollment conference did take place.
We had one more question that I think pertains to discussions. Someone asked, can the enrollment conference take place separately? So I think from their example was that, you know, one conversation sort of happens at one point, and then another conversation happens at a later point. Can that happen?
Yes, you can have a separate enrollment conference, and depending on the subject matter of the enrollment conference, you may talk about sensitive issues and information regarding the student that you may not want the student included in, depending on their age. So you please feel free to use your professional discretion on how that you maintain or have an enrollment conference.
Okay, I think those are all our questions pertaining to this section.
Okay. Now we want to make sure you use your assistance planning guide. So at this time, you can use it for any notes, any helpful strategies, any next steps that you would use following this presentation. And also we want to use this for our next two parts of the presentation that we have too. So for today, especially the questions that have been asked and answered, that would go really well into using into your transition assistance planning guide. Now we'll go to Kyle to give us some summary and next steps.
Thank you, Latrinda. Well, I know that that is a lot of information we have just shared regarding enrollment conferences and the resources that we have developed to support with implementing the enrollment conference and transitions to ease transitions for students who are McKinney-Vento eligible or in foster care. So we would really like for you to share what are some key takeaways from today's training that you would like to share in the chat, or identify some 3 key actions that you'll take back to implement with what you have learned today with your campus staff or your district staff. For instance, we would love to hear whether one key takeaway was like, we have welcome packets, but we're gonna kind of step back and look at the resource that was provided and provide some additional information that's very specific to McKinney-Vento and foster care students to support them. Maybe one key takeaway is that you will utilize the information that we shared and provided training to your staff about the enrollment conferences and sharing these new resources. Some other key actions may be that you'll, if you do have some sort of mentor program, ensuring that students who are new to your campuses and McKinney-Vento eligible are prioritized to receive a mentor. So I'm going to go ahead and defer to Jordan to kind of share some of the information that's being provided in the chat today.
Yeah, thanks guys for providing your takeaways. Valencia said, I need an assistant, which I think was funny. Roxanne said they need to review their welcome packet and add information if needed. Mark said they need to modify their welcome packet. Roxanne also said enrollment conferences were the big takeaway from today. Tammy said that I assume they're going to look into providing a student ambassador program. Chandra said that they would check to see if they have welcome packets and fine tune it, and also look into the student ambassador and mentor program. Desiree said that they have added a tour in addition to the welcome packet with the counselor so that the students have easier transitions, which is awesome. Let's see. Norma said that once the process suggestion is uploaded by TEA, the LEA will continue working on updating the enrollment conferences, train stakeholders, put processes in for documenting the conferences as well. Verlencia said she's going to use her McKinney-Vento funds to purchase folders and meet with front office staff to involve them in the creation of processes. Marva says that we already have a system for enrollment conferences. However, the process is staff driven, and the key takeaway was that enrollment conferences should be student driven. Let's see. Any other ones?
Those are all wonderful comments. That's so exciting. So we're glad to hear that from everybody in the audience today, and continue to include more kind of key takeaways and key actions, because we all learn from each other. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next slide. And we want to share with you that this is a training series. So we will have a part 2 on Wednesday, November 10th, in which we will share more about transfer of student records, award of credit, placement in educational programs and courses. And part 3 will be on Friday, December 3rd, and we'll discuss promotion of access to educational and extracurricular programs, promotion of post-secondary information, provision of special education services, and notice of students' education decision maker and caseworker. And you can see the very nice flyer that Jordan has created and has gone out on our listserv with this information. And then on our next slide, feel free to contact myself at our homeless education email box, or LaTrenda, regarding foster care questions. In the foster care email box, we're here to support you, and we would love to hear about any additional best practices that you're implementing regarding the enrollment conferences, and then also tools and resources and additional trainings that will help support you in the implementation of not just the enrollment conference, but all aspects of this rule. On the next slide, we also want to highly encourage you signing up for our highly mobile and at-risk newsletters. We have this really kind of wonderful graphic here, LaTrenda, that shows how you can go to our website, and so you can go to our webinars, you can go to our tools and resources. You can also see our previous newsletters. So when we say that our tools and resource and webinar will be posted on the website, this is where you would go for that information. And then on our next slide, or you can sign up for our newsletter. And so our newsletters are a great resource. We provide training information when information has been posted to our website, upcoming trainings for our at-risk and highly mobile student programs division for foster care and student success, for McKinney-Vento homeless education, mental health, and military connected students. We would love for you to sign up for our newsletters if you're not part of them right now. And then here on the next slide, we just wanted to, again, share our program contact information with you. And then on our next slide, we do have some more time for a few more questions. Jordan, have we received any additional questions, or maybe some additional chats that you would like to share?
Yeah, we have quite a few additional questions if you want to get into that, or we could say for a later time.
So Jordan, there's a lot of feedback right now when you're speaking.
Let me recess that.
I see in the chat, they're saying, can you please go back to the contact side? There we go.
Now.
Yeah. So we have went ahead and put the contact slide back up for everybody to see. We're really excited about everyone who joined us for today's presentation, and we hope that you will be able to join us for part 2 and part 3. And we're just looking here at any other. I think Jordan's adjusting her sound. We'll go ahead and take a look at some of the questions real quick.
And remember, the presentation and the recording and the PowerPoint will be on our site, on the TEA highly mobile and at-risk site.
Yes. So I was going to go ahead and answer a couple of questions that I can. They're not per se specific to today's presentation, but I wanted to let you know there were some questions about some intake forms and student residency questionnaire forms specific to McKinney-Vento, and we will be sending out a notification when they are posted on our website as well, and that's in reference to a presentation that happened earlier this week. I do see a question about when are we going to get more information about our homeless funds, and that will also be coming out in our future newsletters and communications as well. So I wanted to go ahead and address those questions really quick. And then Jordan, is there anything else that we would like to highlight before we wrap up today's presentation?
Yeah, so one other question about, do I sound better now?
Yes.
Okay, one other question about, new student versus not new student. What about students that are moving between, like, they're going from middle school to high school? Would an enrollment conference still be required for them?
So as part of the new enrollment conference, it's usually students who are new to the campus or to the district. So usually if a student is already has been within the same district, there are usually orientations already provided for new students. But of course, nothing says that you can't go above and beyond and provide some additional support as they move on to the feeder school.
Okay. Can an enrollment conference be combined with an ARD, 504, LPAC, or other types of meetings?
So Latrina, you want to take where you would you?
Sure. An enrollment conference can be combined with those meetings, granted that you meet all the requirements of the enrollment conference. So we have the enrollment conference tool. Remember those items that are on the enrollment conference tool. Make sure all of those are also spoken about within those conferences.
I also wanted to share that that is a local decision, how you would proceed with that as well.
Kristen pointed out that there is a TEC code that requires transition plans for students being released from a DAEP, a JJAP, or a juvenile detention center. And that code requires LEAs to create a personalized transition plan for that student. So I think the question is, like, how does that interact with the enrollment conference and the requirements under 19 CAC 89?
I was going to say, it's my understanding that that is a requirement for all students who are transitioning back. And so if the student is a McKinney-Vento student, we would definitely want you to revisit any unique circumstances or any unique needs for the student as part of that meeting. Latrenda, would you like to add anything else to that regarding foster care students?
For those foster care students, we would want to make sure during that transition time that you speak about any needs that are needed during that time as a student transitions back to the school.
I think that is everything here. Is that all our questions? You're on mute, Cal.
So thank you for everyone who has asked questions and shared information in the chat. We always love the interaction from everybody in the audience. And here on our next slide, we really wanted to highlight, well, first of all, to thank you for attending today's training. But on the next slide, you'll see we would love for you to complete our feedback survey. We're always looking at ways that we can improve our trainings and presentations moving forward. And then also a code for you to subscribe to our updates. So we want to thank everybody again. Latrenda, Jordan, would you like to share any other closing comments?
We want to thank you for joining us today. Please go ahead and sign up for part 2 and part 3. And we look forward to hearing from you all.
Jordan?
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you for taking time of your busy day, especially on a Friday, to join us. We're excited to be here with you. And we hope these tools and presentations are useful as you move forward with the implementation of these new rules. And thank you very much and have a great day.